great luxury products, especially perfumes, are very much like works of art. Each of them encapsulate the very hard work and probably the soul and talent of the people that have made them. There is this energy that comes from honesty that people are extremely sensitive to.
This is the Safari. The Safari is a tour around the consumer, brand, and retailing industry. And we have the great privilege here at my company, Traub, to really be exposed to many of the great minds of the industry who are forming and shaping the future of many different parts of the consumer, brand, and retail world. And I felt it was quite interesting for us to be able to not only learn from all of those people as we do every day, but memorialize it into a podcast, which could then be shared with many of our friends and clients and you, obviously, the listener. Welcome back to the Safari. It is June 2021, and it is my great pleasure to have the fragrance edition today with my friend Frédéric Malle, who is the founder and head of Les Editions de Parfums. Frédéric Malle, who is one of the great experts in fragrance, I think probably period, anywhere. And I really love the fact that he agreed to come onto the Safari because he has this ability to articulate the romance and the artistry of fragrance making, as well as being, quite frankly, one of the great entrepreneurs in the space. So he is, once again, a left and right brain person who really respects and adores both sides of the house. And it's really someone to listen to because he has a vision for his business. It was clear from day one, and he was able to do many things that are very fashionable today, 21 years ago when he founded his company. So stick around. Frédéric, thank you so much for joining me on the Safari. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
I'm thrilled to be with you, Morty.
And you are you're joining us here as it is at this recording. We are in June 2021, and we're at the hopefully the tail end of our pandemic. And I think you are between the city and out of town. And are you seeing your life starting to get back to normal, or are you just very happily conducting business remotely?
I mean, you know what? I hate to say it because there have been so much sufferance, but I've been very happily conducting my business from Long Island. And you probably work much more hours. You get this amazingly efficient day.
Yeah.
There's less serendipity, but it's quite serene and nice, I must say. You see people quite well on a screen, strangely enough.
Yes, I was just on a call with a YouTuber and with 4 or 5 other people, and the YouTuber was beautifully lit. It was completely, incredible looking screen, and everyone else was sort of in shadow, or sort of the screen was upside down. And you don't worry, you look very well lit. I can see you very well there. Even though this is a radio show in a way, right? We both have faces for radio. So let's get right into this because I have so many questions. And
I was told many times that I have a face for radio.
Well,
I'm designed for radio.
Well, you're crazy. Anyway, so listen, this is quite a lovely thing for me to do because on 3 levels. One, we are friends. We've known each other for a very long time. Secondly, I have always followed and am a huge fan of the fragrance industry or just fragrance. I love fragrances, always have, and I'm, as you know, an avid follower and user of your products. And thirdly, I think you are an entrepreneur. This show has always been about the left and the right brain, and I think the idea of you coming on here to talk about how you built your business in a very competitive field and did something very avant-garde. You really let the experts, the people who could have been behind the scenes,
who were hidden in
who
the
were
booth.
hidden. You put them right out in front, and you took almost a back seat, if not entirely a back seat, into their letting them build the oeuvre, the masterpieces that they'd always dreamed of, but others had told them, nope, that's not going to sell. But Frédéric Malle, les Editions Frédéric Malle said, no, we want your masterpieces, and we're going to trot them out for you. So talk to us, therefore, given that it's such a passion of mine to hear you speak about this. Talk about the beginnings of your company, but also through the lens of your history. Your career before then was very much both in your upbringing, in your family background, but also obviously the precedence to your actual namesake company was always around the luxury goods as well as fragrance industries, n'est-ce pas?
My God, what a big program. It's like like a jump in the void. Well, first of all, I mean, when people say, hear that I was brought up in this business, yes, my mother was in this industry. My grandfather had worked with Coty, who was literally the inventor of modern perfumery, in every sense of the way. From advertising, from bottling properly, and making specific bottles for specific products. He invented also every single type of perfumes. So my grandfather was his businessman, really, for years. And I think that was no better way to learn the trade. And then eventually he started his own business. And part of that was helping a friend, his childhood friend, who was called Christian Dior, and therefore becoming the founder of Parfum Christian Dior, where my mother worked all her life. My mother is a bit like Chancy Gardner in being there. She started there at 18 and she went till retirement. I think she worked there for 48 years. She didn't know anything else than Dior. But as a result, she was so devoted to Dior. She talked about it. It was very much a big part of her life. So it's not that she told me the difference between patchouli and jasmine. I didn't learn like some people that came from that trade, perfumery, but I learned to take it seriously. I learned that it was existing. And this eventually led me to start my own company. So I had been minding my own business, working in advertising first, and then working in a lab. And then I was a consultant for various brands, working with Christian Lacroix. I had started something with Marc Burley. I had been consultant for Hermès International. I was doing my own thing. And then I realized that the industry had taken a turn towards mass market, and that distribution really defined it. And when distribution shifted towards self-service, namely Marionneau, Sephora, Douglas, this kind of structure, the industry had to adapt to not working with advisors. And as a result, perfumes, the perfumer's job changed drastically. They went from making perfumes that were like logos that had to be very creative, that could be recognized instantly, that had this amazing trail. I remember women going down Madison Avenue, which is sort of, half a block behind them of perfume, making a statement, to making a crowd pleaser, to making a perfume that, one size fit all type of thing. Which is basically what you can find in supermarkets that are organized like self-service perfumeries, or in reverse. Self-service perfumeries are organized like supermarkets. And so the trade changed quite a lot. Perfumers were quite frustrated. I was frustrated, bored to be more precise. And people around me in my civil life, in my private life, were working away from perfume. They were not wearing perfume anymore. I realized that I went from being an interesting guy through my job to being irrelevant somehow, which was a sign. And so because, I learned to love this business and to take it very seriously, not to cut corner, to be creative, to do all that. And I was seeing all my sort of principles sort of fading away, or I was completely inadapted to this. And because I was hearing perfumers complaining, I thought, that there had to be, another path, that we could stick to our moral compass, still stick to our guns, make interesting modern perfumery and be successful. So basically the market went left and went right.
Yes.
So there was zero. I mean, I had one competitor, which was Serge Lutens, which I've always admired, and who was making luxury perfumes.
So just to interrupt for a second, would you say that at a moment in time, the industry decided, if you were to envision a bell curve, right, that the industry decided that it would chase the center of the bell curve, which is to say, let's create fragrances that will attract the largest number of people based on some kind of research that they did, versus chasing more unique elements and more intricate scents and combinations that might not sell as many to as many people, but ultimately would be along the bell curve versus at the center of the bell curve. And they stuck to the center and you went down the tail, potentially?
Precisely. But one has to, out of experience, if you look at all the great classics, all of them are specific, whether it's Chalimard, Diorissimo, Obsession, Chanel No. 5, they are all very, very specific perfumes. They are not shooting in the middle. And so perfume is so personal that if you want to make a classic, you have to take a risk. And there is almost this reward for risk, which is almost proportional to the risk that you take, funnily enough. And when you try to aim at the middle of the target, which the market was doing then, if you are successful, you can only support the success becomes sustainable only if it's really supported by advertising and a lot of money. Yeah. And so it's like artificial, agriculture. It takes a lot of chemicals to make it work.
Yeah.
And great perfumes. If you take a risk and if you make a very specific perfume, you can hit a home run, which we have, during those last 20 years. And those perfumes, although amazingly specific, take off.
And is the brand 20 years old?
21.
21. Goodness me. Yeah, but if you think about what you just said in the pantheon of fragrance brands, and I would say brands, period. So empowering creators, right?
Yeah.
Empowering creators. We're in the creator-led world of YouTube and TikTok, and you empowered creators 21 years ago to have at it, to take a canvas, and that you were going to back them, which is what Gucci has been doing for the last 2 or 3 years with great success. You've been doing it for 21 years.
That's what Saint Laurent did.
Yeah, and there's a chicken and the egg of creating any product, and indeed a fragrance, which, for example, if Steve Jobs was sitting at this table talking to us right now, he'd say, look, I had to create something that the consumer didn't know they wanted yet, and it was in discovering it through us creating it that they bought it in droves. Is there a parallel here, which is to say, don't always create something by focus group? Create things that are really genuinely coming from a passion place, a place of newness, of discovery, of ideation and incubation, versus having to follow ad nauseam what's the drumbeat of consumer insights, which is really important on one level, but can maybe stifle innovation in the other. What do you say to that?
I say to that great luxury products, especially perfumes, are very much like works of art. Each of them encapsulate the very hard work and probably the soul and talent of the people that have made them. There is this energy that comes from honesty that people are extremely sensitive to. And when you have those rehashed 300 times crowd pleasers that have been made by focus groups, people also feel that. And you can push it to their face and sort of force feed them with them to a certain point. But eventually they will get bored. But another way of saying this is that I believe that, perfumes are very much like people. Someone that wants to please everybody ultimately, gets invited a few college parties, but eventually is seen as a radiating bore, ends up alone in his studio because he's a pathetic bore. And no one wants to see him or her. Yes, man, there's nothing worse. But people that have, you were mentioning Steve Jobs, people that have real character are the ones that people remember.
Point of view.
And that people get attached to. And perfumes are very much the same. If there is a soul, whether you like it or you hate it, but the few people that will like it will love it and will cling on to them forever because they see a part of themselves, because there's also this idea of this projection happening. So it becomes very personal and it becomes something that you can cling on to and be very proud of. And you have a sense of ownership. Whether something which is made by a focus group is not something that you can own. It's something that's forced upon you and it becomes a convention.
I want to take a second to explain to you why Traub is able to bring you the safari. We pride ourselves in being at the very center of a very global, very complicated consumer and retail landscape. And in our travels, as we help think, manage, and expand businesses in many different channels and geographies, we're able to meet and learn from some of the great minds in this industry. And it's really wonderful to be able to bring them to you. And in doing so, I hope that you, the listener, will be able to learn a little bit more about what we do at Traub as well. Back to the safari. So when speaking about the artist, and I would say even if you think about a writer, a very good writer of fiction, has the ability to understand people and the poetry that will tug on their heartstrings. When you're designing a perfume, therefore, and with your colleagues and partners, what creates memory, because ultimately, I think fragrance above all things evokes the most vivid memories of childhood or something, good or bad.
Yeah, it's also, the way you smell. Perfume is hardly, no one knows that, but it's a geek thing. But in your brain, it's right there in the back. The part that sort of makes you understand what you're smelling is actually linked to memory directly. It's hooked in. So it's even, we're wired like this.
And so when creating, therefore, a new fragrance, how is that linked to memory being cultivated? How are you approaching it? Are you starting with the end consumer in mind? What do I want to evoke? Or are you creating a de novo fragrance or scent that will be then part of that person's memory? How do you, I guess that's another chicken and the egg. Like, what comes first in the creation of your wonderful chefs-d'oeuvre?
So we work in the exact opposite order than any other companies, probably because I grew up professionally in a lab, and probably because I speak the perfumer's language. So we speak in terms of raw material or in terms of perfume architecture. And so when I work with a perfumer, there are the odd cases when, they come to me and say, Frédéric, I've been working on something. Do you want to have a go at it? And either it's very close to being finished or they are in the middle of it and they sort of ask for my opinion and whether it's worth pursuing or do I have an idea to improve it and so on, because I'm like a sounding board for them. But when we work from scratch, to answer your question, we talk about ingredients and masses, like a sculptor would talk about his future work. And then words are replaced by first trials. Things like that. And then we decide whether it's interesting or not. And then we refine it. Then you have variants like that. And you go...
Just for those listening, you're showing me little accoutrements, which are visual representations of the fragrance.
Yes. So we go through hundreds of iterations to make it right. So we never think of a consumer. We never think of anyone at the beginning. We just think of a beautiful shape. We think of something that we would be proud of, basically. Now, making a perfume takes months. And when we work on them, the whole idea, the whole process is to make perfect the early sketch that we have made, because it never is exactly perfect. But you don't want to lose the character, and you want to stay very true to the idea. Otherwise, it becomes one of those nondescript, boring things, which is supposedly faultless, but super boring. And so the idea is to really, it's a hard exercise, and it goes through many iterations. Now, on the middle of that, because you want to keep the character, one of my ways of staying online, to stay the course, because that's really my job also, is to make sure that we stay on track, is I imagine on the way, and it comes automatically, who is going to wear it. I can see the character. I mean, having sold so many perfumes to so many people, I know that certain characters or each perfume corresponds to a way of seducing. And we are like seduction machines. We always want to seduce, but we all have our own recipe and our own ideal of ourselves. And so the perfumes that we choose to wear are very much in line with who we are. So you can do it in reverse when you know the business. And when I smell something, I can see you, Morty, or I can see Liz Taylor, or I can see anyone, whether it's someone I know or someone who is, or someone I fantasize on. But all these people have a smell. And this is a way for me to stay on track. And this is also how I find the name at the end. And then it's interesting, it's fun to see if I'm right or not, because when the perfume is commercialized, it's always interesting to see who ends up wearing it. And I must say, to be a bit cocky, is that I'm often right.
Yeah, that's so wonderful.
It's something you learn. But we never think, Chinese market.
Yeah.
Let's make a rose.
Yeah, you start with a white canvas, and then as the canvas comes to life, a caricature of an individual or a persona starts to emerge, and then it starts to be obvious to you, but it was not at the beginning.
I think there's one thing to add to this, is that my ultimate luxury is that I started this company because I created the system, really. Mm-hmm. I started this company opening my own store Rue de Grenelle and training people in that store to sell perfumes to individuals, not according to their own taste, not according to a bestseller or to, selling the most expensive or whatnot, or the latest. We sell in a very, very personalized way. We really try to tailor, to point out each individual towards a perfume that we think is right for him or her. Now, this sounds, like a marketing thing. It's not. It's a very thorough. This is a method that I worked on, and one of the reasons why I want that is not only, if you create the right couple between a perfume and an individual, they are both going to shine. Mm-hmm. And 1 + 1 becomes 3, and then it becomes a fantastic advertising for us on top of it, but also someone who comes back to us.
Yeah.
But at the other end of the spectrum, it allows perfumers and I to be amazingly free, because we know that in store we have people that are going to make very good use of specific perfumes. So because we have this very good service in our stores, this very personalized service, we can be free with perfumers. And as a result, because I work with perfumers that are very different from one another, and because we have different fantasies somehow, and I push them to be themselves, we have now 30 perfumes that are extremely different from one another. So we cover every walks of life. So instead of trying to please everybody with, it's like a one-size-fits-all underwear, I let you imagine what it's like. We have something specific for each kind of individual. And therefore, that's why people come back to us.
Well,
even during the pandemic, we were selling amazingly well on the web because people just couldn't live without those perfumes.
Yeah, well, you're looking at one of them. But what's also interesting about it is that it is the hyper-segmentation that Chanel or Louis Vuitton have used with their different handbag names, because
absolutely right.
Right, it's just being able to find a different bag for a different course, or horses for courses, as it were.
Yes, right? But Louis Vuitton, Hermès, they have their own stores, and there's a reason why they can do that. If they were selling, exclusively in a department store, or even something less personal than that, they would not be able to have this huge array of handbags.
And to talk a little bit, let's come down off Mount Olympus for just 3 minutes, down to the business world, because what I love about your business, and indeed maybe other fragrance businesses, but in particular yours, whereby this term from digital native land, which has been overused recently, but it's been around forever, which is the idea of lifetime value of the customer divided by the customer acquisition cost. And if someone is an enthusiast about a product, they not only stay with you for a very long time, so the very long lifetime value, but the customer acquisition cost is cut in half or in quarters or what have you, because they've told all their friends about the product, or better, their friends have asked them, you smell wonderful, what is it you're wearing? So the ratio of LTV to CAC is through the roof, which is very hard to achieve. And so ultimately you have a sticky customer, and one that is marketing for you every day because people are smelling them all the time. It's kind of magic.
It is. And it was really the way this company was designed. It's because, you leave a trail. We on top of it, because I'm old fashioned and I started, working in perfumery in the 80s, when perfume smelled and diffused and were long lasting. We give, something for people's money, and all our, apart from haute cologne, obviously, but all our scents last about 8 hours. And if you wear the right perfume for you, and you have this trail, you are gonna, taxi cabs will stop you. Everybody will stop you.
And so
that's good for us.
How
if people don't keep their secrets to themselves, which they often do.
No, there we go. Yes, the people don't want to be copied. But so how would you say? Let's not say the last 21 years, but let's say in the last decade, with the advent of new marketing, right? TikTok and YouTube and all the rest of it. How do you think that has affected the fragrance industry, if at all? Has it changed the way you guys think about going to market, or is it the same as before?
Two things. I think that Instagram especially has, and this, the advent of smartphones and people taking pictures of themselves all the time and trying to sort of glorify their look, have focused a lot of people on imagery rather than scent. Mm-hmm. And so I suppose it has been quite good for makeup. But somehow, and you can see that with the success that we have in China, regardless of that, so there was this sort of wave which was just, visual focused. focused on visual. But I think people now really understand that, they have to become even more individual, and that there is another dimension, and perfume is actually very strong everywhere. The other thing is that there was this say in marketing companies that you couldn't sell perfume on the internet. Mm-hmm. And, I was reading Len Lauder's book the other day, and this whole idea of sampling, that really, it's the way they started selling Youth Do, and the way they were selling their creams, is if you just apply those very old principles, and if you are a generous company, and if you can absolutely reproduce the type of almost of experience on web than you do on in a store. And I think that we have understood in the last few years that we can be, and we still have a few things to improve on at that level. But I think that the online experience can be almost as rich as walking into a store. It's dealing with time in a slightly different way. But I think that people today only buy stuff that they have sampled, whether it's creams or a car or a perfume, of course. And also, you need to have a very personalized service, and this is something that can absolutely be done online. So I think that there was this thing that, it couldn't be done, but I think that with the proper thinking and the proper work, perfume is going to be very, very present online. It doesn't have to spring out of your computer. That's absurd. It reminds me, we are a little bit at a time of pre-electric cars. All the brands, the car industry were saying, oh, let's wait for a very light battery that can encapsulate a lot of power to come out, and then we'll make an electric car. And they kept on making cars, regular cars. And then all of a sudden, Tesla decided to have a very heavy battery because it already existed. And a battery that was, having the whole powertrain more or less the same weight as a regular car. Mm-hmm. And in fact, it was right in front of them. They just didn't want to do it.
It was hidden in plain sight. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, the same thing happened 20 years ago when I put the perfumers in the open eyes. No one wanted to do it. I never understood why, to be honest. Even when I was just before launching the company, I thought maybe there's something hidden that I did not understand. Why is no one doing it? Because they are so interesting. Now, selling perfume on the web is more or less the same thing. I think that for the longest time we have been thinking, oh, it's impossible, and we have to wait until it's better, and until a computer can sort of, throw perfume at your face. But in fact, no, there is absolutely a way to do it.
Yeah, what's a wonderful replenishment tool too. But just to go back to what you were saying earlier, you not only invented a new way of delivering product or sense to the consumer with your wonderful talent roster next to you, but in so doing, launched a whole category, because ultimately every single large luxury player in this field, especially the luxury brands, have now a large range of beautiful fragrances that they created in your image, with price points that are double or triple the average price point of any other fragrance they put out before. So do you think that ultimately the let's call it mastige consumer who buys the historical product will end up just graduating to your world, because ultimately you might be able to take over, I call it the airport business, but you know what I mean, the general masstige fragrance business?
I think it's funny because I saw that 20 years ago and I still stick to my guns. I think that this masstige business is going to replace the old mass market business that goes from body sprays to those cheaper perfumes that you find at Walmart.
Yeah.
And basically they are made in a very similar way. Those masstige perfumes, they are crowd pleasers. They are as cheap as possible. And they use the same recipes. So there will always be a crowd for this for many reasons. Price, of course, because they are also selling small sizes. And culture, because as you know, Morty, I mean, there is purchasing power, but there's also culture. And not everybody has access intellectually to something which is not a celebrity perfume and is not really interested. But for more educated people and wealthier people, I think they are absolutely going to graduate to this category, which it's true we initiated very immodestly.
Yeah. See, I'm allowed to say it. It's okay. That's great. Now listen, you as we come to the terminus, I'd love to just talk about experience, because I'm a big lover of the retail, right? Obviously, part of my training was there, and I also feel that used properly, it is one of the most wonderful ways to educate and to please and to delight a consumer. And when retail is used in that way, as opposed to just a distribution channel, it is incredibly powerful. Now, you did retail from the beginning. You also, I think at one point, maybe you still do, have these chambers where one could smell, and then you created new products like the mechanical flowers, which put home fragrance out there. You have rubber products. I know all of them. Rubber products which you can put in the car to make your car or a small space smell nice. What innovation is coming down the pike? What are you excited about? What can you give us a little sneak peek under the hood as to what you hope to develop over the next period? And it might not be a sneak peek. It might just be, optimism about the future.
Well, there is something that we did for China, actually, is that we have, to redesign our sort of new store concept, we have really gone back to Rue de Grenelle, interestingly enough. And we didn't try to go back to the original store. And where we have the smelling columns, we had 7 Rue de Grenelle, then we had a bit, for instance, at Barney's, we had 4, and you can fill them with different perfumes. Now we have thinner ones, very well designed, not by me this time. So I can't say that. And they sort of sample each perfume. And it's like a wall of perfume. And it's very beautiful. I think that people will walk out of their homes to buy a perfume as if they were going to a destination, if they are entertained, if they meet expertise, if it's a fun and interesting moment for them. Otherwise, why not buy on a computer? And so I fully agree with you that the future is very much in retail, but retail done properly, retail done with love, retail done with very well-trained staff. And so that's what we're trying to do. As for sneak peeks, you talked about Fleur Mécanique, talked about car things. We are working very hard on new things for the home, actually, at the moment. And we're on the radio, so I can't show you, but as you know, there are plenty of little bottles in front of me. The great things about my business is that, I can have all these bottles and not tell any secrets, because they all look the same, but they all smell different. That's the fun of it.
Yeah, Frédéric Malle tells no secrets. There we go. Frédéric, it is such a joy. I could spend another hour talking to you on this. So thank you very much for joining me on the safari.
Thanks for having me, Morty. It was fun.
Yeah, and
always nice to see you, as you know.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Frédéric. If you want to learn a little bit more about Traub, you can go to traub.io, where you'll learn a lot about everything that we do. If you're enjoying the safari, please do share it with your friends and colleagues within the industry. And please also don't forget to subscribe and like it. Until next time.